This is Where Porn Stars Go to Die, Episode 1, Gretchen Hill. So looking over top the Hollywood sign in Los Angeles, there's a vast valley, and it's painted in with houses and streets and shopping malls, and not much else. Here begins the infamous San Fernando Valley, a purgatory located somewhere between broken dreams and compromise. Nearly 2 million people inhabit the valley, yet you'd be hard-pressed to find anything that you could call an attraction. That is, unless you count the abandoned nuclear test complex, which you can quickly hike past if you like. This is the place where the term soccer mom was coined. It's as if Los Angeles had a boil that popped and it oozed into the adjacent valley until it was all full up. It's a trendy place where residents buy Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop products and don't experience any sense of shame. In 1982, Frank Zappa's song Valley Girl topped the music charts and put the valley on the cultural map. Moon Unit Zappa, just 14 at the time, brought Valley Speak to the rest of the world and popularized phrasing still used today. For example, the word like as a discourse marker, as in, Mom, I drove the car into the pool and now I'm drowning. Now, 20 miles away from the Hollywood sign, you can easily see where the valley ends, at the slopes of the Santa Susana Mountains. That is where our story begins. It's the upscale community of Porter Ranch, because that's where our hero is busy working, so to speak. We meet him through the eyes of 50-year-old Gretchen Hill, who, by her own admission, is no fun at all. She lives with her husband Ronnie in a home in Porter Ranch, a nice home, a mansion-y home, a professionally decorated home, a home with a highly desirable 1.6 to 1 bathroom-to-bedroom ratio. She doesn't think she's rich because she's always running into people richer than her. Now, whether you live in a cardboard box with a piece of scrap tin for a roof, or you're ensconced in the middle class but have to make your own breakfast, you're probably going to consider Gretchen rich. Her property sits inside a gated community. Not one of those fake gated communities with the fake guard booths. They're prefab and they got fake glass that you can't see through. No, roaming rapists passed right by those. Gretchen lives in a real gated community with real guards and real gates. She, like most people within her community, has a housekeeper. She also has a gardener and a weekend housekeeper. Some people in her community, not Gretchen, have a weekend gardener. There have been occasions where Gretchen has felt insecure about not having a weekend gardener, and unfortunately, today is going to be one of those days. The vehicle of choice in this part of Porter Ranch is the luxury brand Bentley. Although there's a real trend towards large black suburban SUVs with tinted windows. This conveys an air of being too important to be seen, which is desirable. It could even imply someone is of high enough stature that they need to be protected and hidden by such a large stealthy vehicle. Now that's also desirable. When a blacked out SUV drives by, you can never be sure who's inside. It could be your neighbor Alice, headed to the Galleria in an attempt to fill the void in her soul. Or it could be a chauffeur taking an entertainment executive to a meeting with Snoop Dogg. One never knows. In a limited number of cases, it's just people giving the finger to the Prius crowd. That too is desirable in some circles. Regardless, anyone seen in a Honda Civic after dark will be suspected of being a drug dealer or worse. Gretchen got out of the shower, towel-dried her hair, and slipped into her bathrobe. It's 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The sky is as blue as it gets in L.A. There's not a wildfire for miles. A steady breeze from the ocean is blowing much of the smog inland to Palm Springs, where it belongs. Gretchen was in a good mood and unaware of the horrors her day would bring. She looked at the back of the property and was startled to see her husband Ronnie fending off a raccoon with a long pole by the pool. The raccoon seemed unafraid of Ronnie, which was not surprising to Gretchen. Nevertheless, she was glad he was getting rid of the vermin. This maddening scene reminded Gretchen that other people in her community have a weekend gardener, but not her. Gretchen had decided to forego breakfast since the maid was late getting in. She put her hair in curlers because she wanted to look good at brunch with her book club at noon. The book club girls had all agreed to drink champagne this week. It was an attempt to spice things up after a string of terrible books involving wild horses and misunderstood cowboys. Gretchen anticipated a spate of naughty behavior and possible overeating this week. She groaned when Ronnie tripped over a deck chair and was teetering at the edge of the pool. He was now, out of necessity, balancing himself with the long pole, like a high-wire artist teetering on the edge of doom. "What's become of him?" thought Gretchen. Then she noticed movement by her neighbor's pool. "Well, that's odd," she thought. The house had been sitting vacant on the real estate market for months, and it was very strange to see activity early on a Sunday morning. Gretchen looked back at Ronnie to find that he had lost his fight with gravity and had fallen into the pool, fully clothed. The raccoon, not 10 feet away under a shrub, sat looking at Ronnie sympathetically. Gretchen knocked on the window to get Ronnie's attention, but Ronnie was already climbing up a ladder onto the roof of the pool house, where the raccoon had led him. In Gretchen's mind, the raccoon was intentionally leading Ronnie somewhere precarious, perhaps as a means to kill him. Gretchen saw 2 young women in bikinis come into the pool area next door. She knew this to be a warning sign. Her eyebrows furrowed, causing her curlers to tighten against her scalp. "This can't be happening," she thought. She shouted for Ron, but the windows were closed. She awkwardly fiddled with the window hardware to try and open it, but had forgotten how. The maid always did it for her. She looked back at one of the women by the neighbor's pool. "Those breasts aren't real," she thought. She sprang into action like a dog seeing another dog out the window. She moved from window to window and floor to floor to get a better look. Gretchen only met the owner of the home twice. Once, coincidentally, was to warn him about raccoons and his trash. Then she had an uncomfortable conversation with him after he tried to entice her gardener to go work for him. Since then, Gretchen and he didn't so much as exchange a wave. She certainly didn't wave to that traitor Carlos, her former gardener, who did begin working next door for the man. Today, though, the goings-on next door were even worse, far worse than the brazen daylight theft of the gardener. It was, in fact, Gretchen's worst nightmare. Gretchen had pornofilmophobia, the fear of porn being shot in your neighborhood. This suspicion was confirmed when she saw an Italian-looking man with a ponytail talking to the women in bikinis. Gretchen wasn't going to stand for it. She wanted to call out to the maid to locate her white sneakers so she could go over there and give them a piece of her mind. She was horrified to discover Ronnie cordially talking to the very people she was upset about. The ones whose tanned flesh radiated in the sun from 200 feet away. Blonde-haired women in bikinis. There stood Ronnie on the pool house roof, dripping on the terracotta, talking away with a smile on his face while women laughed. Is he flirting, Gretchen wondered. When's the last time Ronnie flirted? She couldn't remember when. To make matters worse, the raccoon was just sitting there on the roof waiting for Ronnie. The person closest to Gretchen was betraying her before her eyes. She began to pace and bite her nails. Gretchen was born rich and Baptist in San Antonio, Texas. When fate led her to the San Fernando Valley, she became paranoid about the adult film industry. And that's because she read an article in Vanity Fair that convinced her the place was crawling with greasy men with mustaches and sex viruses. In fact, the Valley had been home to film crews producing pornographic material ever since the 1970s. Historically, cheap warehouse rent, access to film professionals, and out-of-work actors made the Valley the perfect place for the adult film industry to set up. Nowadays, the trend is to rent a mansion as it sits idle on the real estate market, then film as much fornication as you can, indoors and out, from sunup to sundown. Wealthy people's homes are the preferred backdrop for most porn auteurs. It's widely understood that coitus just looks better in an opulent setting. Conversely, most amateur porn is filmed in trailer homes. Gretchen was angry. The thought of her husband having a cordial conversation with one of those people caused her to snap. With her heart pounding, she lurched out of the front door without realizing she was wearing a bathrobe and nothing else. She didn't even feel the pain of small stones under her naked feet as she stomped down the pavement to her neighbor's drive. She arrived to find the horrific sight of 2 white cargo vans and an assortment of Honda Civics. This had all the earmarks of the porn shoot she saw in the evening news one time. An area couple had complained about people having sex outdoors in full sight of their grandparents. A quote in the story about the grandfather searching for his bottle of Viagra pills haunted Gretchen to this day. She found a young tattooed man pulling crates out of a van and charged right up to him. "This is a porno film, isn't it?" Gretchen breathlessly asked. "No, ma'am," responded the man, somewhat unconvincingly. "We are here to fix the plumbing." "Then why are there young women with boobs by the pool?" demanded Gretchen, not really thinking about what she had said. "Oh, he's a very good plumber, ma'am," said the man as he quickly rolled his cart up the driveway to escape her. This threw her. What on earth did he mean? Plumbing? What? Then she noticed there were all kinds of wires and cords in his cart. Her eyes narrowed. Plumbers don't use those, she thought. The man disappeared into the house through a side door before she could say anything. She was left alone to be judged by a passing dog walker in full yoga attire. Gretchen realized she was just in her robe and pulled it tight with her belt. "Good morning," she said to the woman, embarrassed. Like others that morning, the dog walker didn't hear Gretchen, or even smile at her. The yoga dog walker was listening to and very much enjoying an episode of Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop podcast on her earpods. Gretchen might have guessed as much. Paltrow's powers are strong in Porter Ranch. Gretchen was about to return home to call 911 when she noticed the front door of the neighbor's house was slightly ajar. This tempted Gretchen to erase any seed of doubt the tattooed man had planted in her with his claims of plumbing, so she approached the door. And when she got close, she heard something she'd never heard before, a woman in ecstasy. Feigned ecstasy, but ecstasy. This caused Gretchen to stop in her tracks. Could she really proceed, she wondered. But she had decided bravely that she had gone too far to turn back. Besides, her adrenaline was now in charge, not her. She was going to get justice at any cost. Gretchen rang the doorbell, and the woman in ecstasy became momentarily quiet. A second later, she started moaning again. Then the door quickly opened and someone grabbed Gretchen by the wrist and forcefully pulled her inside. That's it for this episode. We'll continue next time on Where Porn Stars Go to Die. I'm James Whittingham. Thanks for listening.